live in 5, 4.
Good evening and welcome to the Coeur d'Alene City Council meeting for the August 15th meeting of 2023. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Bang, bang. Now when I remember, it's never here. We don't have anybody scheduled for an invocation. I would offer a prayer for all those folks that are dealing with the wildfires, particularly all those who've lost their homes in Hawaii. Try to keep them in your prayers. And this evening, I would ask Kiki to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, I would ask Terry Pickle to come forward with a presentation on water usage. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I come before you tonight with just some informational items here in the first go-around. There we go. So I was asked to come and make a presentation on where we're at with the water situation. Oh, going to have
There we
our
go.
illustrious lead. There we go. All right. So, of course, as we can see by today, the summer season is upon us. We hit triple digits today. So how are we doing on water? Well, we're pumping a boatload of it. So typically, in the wintertime, we use 3 of our 11 wells. Today, we're using all 11 of them. In the mornings, between 2 and 6 a.m., we're typically pumping at least half of our daily water. All of that's for irrigation. 75% of our summertime consumption is strictly for irrigation. Some of our biggest users are our own Parks Department and the school district. And I do want to extend a thank you, a sincere thank you to them. Last 3 weeks ago, Mr. Marine asked them to cut back on their watering schedules to help us out as we were depleting our reservoirs very rapidly in the mornings, and they did manage to cut those back. That helped us gain a lot of headway. Today we're doing fairly well. We're typically pumping between 34 and 35 million gallons a day. We hit 38.8 million gallons in July, and I would imagine probably today or tomorrow we'll hit our peak for this month, and I would imagine it will probably exceed that. As you can see by the screen behind me here, I've got years 21, 22, and what we have so far in 23 for comparison. We have pumped well over double monthly since May compared to 2022. Of course, we've had warmer than normal temperatures, less rainfall, almost no rainfall in June. Same thing with July, and August is shaping up to be exactly the same way. I'm estimating that we will hit over 5 billion gallons this year. Typically, we do between 4.2 and 4.5 a year on average. So it is going to be a hot, dry summer. Here's a chart that kind of shows what I was talking about for May, June, and July, where we are. We're shaping up like 2021, where we hit our peak at 42.66 million gallons a day on July 1st. We were able to get with our Parks Department and the school district, and many of our customers cut back that year to help us get by. We were short a well at that time. We do have an additional well. The problem is our peak capacity or peak hourly demand. Here is just some seasonal climate charts that I had put together. You can kind of see the hot temperatures. Anything over 90 to 95 degrees is sweltering. Well, I say over 100 is blistering. So, and we've got there. So operational capacity, we can do up to 49 million gallons a day. That's 34,000 gallons per minute. As I stated, right now we're seeing peaks in between 2 and 6 a.m. nearing 40,000 gallons a minute. So that is depleting our reservoirs. We're pumping almost 19 million gallons in 4 hours. So that is everything running full bore and draining our reservoirs rapidly. So, just to give you a little perspective, I was asked to present this. I think it's a good example. An Olympic-sized swimming pool holds 660,000 gallons of water, and you've all witnessed what those look like. At our peak in July at 38.8 million gallons per day, we could fill 59 pools. At 34 million gallons, that's 51 and a half pools a day. If you do the 49 million gallons, you're at 64. As I mentioned, 40,000 gallons per minute for 4 hours. That's 14 and a half of those pools in 4 hours we're filling. So that's a lot of water, at least for a city our size. Spokane's double that, maybe even 10 times that. I wanted to present some tips to our customers just so they can hear it for wise water use, and you'll hear that phrase a lot in the water industry. It's important not to water during the heat of the day, typically anywhere from 10 to 12 to 6 p.m. You're wasting water, it's evaporating faster than you can put it on the lawn, and at that time, if the sun is intense enough, it can actually burn your lawn with all the water, with the refraction. So water only what your landscape needs. Turf needs an inch per week. That's 27,500 gallons per week for an acre. So the problem is a lot of the irrigation systems are only 30 to 40% efficient between the way they're designed, improper maintenance, improper setup, wind drift, evaporation. So you're watering almost 84,000 gallons just to get that 27,000 gallons on your lawn. So that's something to think about. You can do a lot of work on your irrigation system to tune those up and save a lot of money yourself. So they're very easy to do. So make sure you do all the maintenance on the irrigation system, set it for what the yard needs. The main thing that we find is a lot of people set those at the peak time of the year when they need the most water and leave them. They run until they shut them off. In the spring, they turn them back on, never change that setting, so they water what we call a box. The same thing year for 5 months of the year. If you water to what it needs, what we call a bell curve, you can save on the money on the spring and the fall. We're not going to save at the hottest time of the year, but we can save a lot of water and a lot of money doing that. So that's one thing to look at. If watering by hand, use a hose bit timer rather than just let it sit out there and run. And don't water during wet weather. Use a moisture sensor, rain sensor, something like that. Put on your systems. They're very inexpensive, very efficient. I don't know how many times I drive around and see irrigation systems going during a rainstorm. I've even seen them on snow. So, what are our neighbors doing about the situation right now? We have a lot of neighbors that are having some difficulties with their water systems and overuse. So they're looking at ordinances that limit water times and establishing alternative water schedules such as City of Spokane. Some of our neighboring agencies are looking at that seriously right now. Establishing emergency procedures or emergency declarations if something happens, if you lose a well or something goes down, to be able to maintain the water system. We have looked at this as well, updating their rate structures to promote conservation. That seems to be more of a short-term solution at the moment. Our rates are still so low that water is affordable. You get people coming from out of state where water is very expensive, and they don't pay attention to it. They want green grass, they're going to water it, they're going to pay for it. You would have to make a rate structure that's so astronomical to enforce conservation that it's just not practical. So we have done that in ours. It's effective for the first year, maybe part of the second year, and then they're accustomed to it. So. And they're looking at other options and potential new sources. The problem with that is water is becoming more of an issue, especially in the future as the population grows. As you saw on your desk there, I gave you the new SVRP Aquifer Atlases that just came off the press 3 weeks ago. Gives you a lot of good information. There are nearly 600,000 customers on this aquifer right now. What will it support? don't know. There's not a really quantifiable study out there yet that really tells you what it will really support before it starts to decline. Through the Idaho-Washington Aquifer Collaborative, where we're looking for a new consultant to do a new study. They have an estimate of what the SVRP will hold for water, but it moves 50 to 60 feet per day, so it's kind of hard to quantify what it will actually support. So it's one of the most rapid moving aquifers in the nation. So, also, the issue of water rights. Things are changing at the state level, and water rights that have been relatively easy to get are going to be exceedingly more difficult, especially surface water rights that we use a few of for irrigating our parks and stuff. So there's some difficulties with that. So what can we do now? Well, we can encourage conservation for our customers. If they can do their part to help us cut back, that prevents having to build that new expensive infrastructure out there. We've considered an ordinance providing limitations for watering time, such as watering from noon to 6. That seems to be a pretty common ordinance out there now. We've discussed the issues of odd-even watering in certain situations. I've got some kind of a bit of pushback from people on that one. It's not something I would really favor either, but it's an option that's out there. Spokane does it not because the aquifer is declining, but because it's affecting the river. The aquifer does affect the river, and so when it gets to a point where the river flows are getting low enough, they encourage cutting back, so they're not drawing as much from the aquifer and depleting the river. So, we could enact policy or ordinances to require minimum irrigation efficiencies, such as 60%, 70%, very easy to attain, and encourage low water use landscapes. What about the future? Well, we know that we're going to keep growing. In 2035, they're estimating that we'll have 75 to 85,000 customers in Coeur d'Alene alone, not to mention Kootenai County. So we are proposing to work with the Planning Commission to either look at effectively reducing green space requirements for new developments, or at least require a portion of that to be low water use landscaping. It's more expensive to build, but it uses less water in the long run and preserves our resources. We had mentioned with Coeur, when we start talking to them, encouraging some type of water efficient subdivision designs. And so they're looking at that. They're looking at their own green space and irrigation systems for their green space. So we're kind of working with them on that. We've been in discussion with Councilmember McEvers and Mr. Anderson from the wastewater department about reuse. There's a potential there. The problem is funding. There isn't a lot of funding encouraged for that at this point. Down south, it's used preferentially, and it's going to be coming this way sometime. We have a resource there. If we can find some sort of funding for it, that would be significant enough to offset the irrigation in the city. We could look at doing landscape rebate programs like Spokane and Moscow to reduce the turf and build water-saving landscapings. And there's other alternatives that are coming online too. Here's just a couple examples of low water use methods. On the left there, you will see wicking beds. This is something we've constructed at the water department as an example through our conservation program. They store water for a couple weeks at a time without any irrigation system. They've worked extremely well. As you can see, the top picture on the left was when they were planted in late June, and on the second picture there, that was 4 weeks later. And they're just going crazy right now. And you put water in there every couple of weeks. So, and it just does its own thing. So, the two pictures to the right are low water use landscapings, rock beds, native plants that are designed for arid climates. So a lot of different things we can do there. And they're not unattractive. I mean, you see some landscapes that are kind of, okay, it's a desert. It doesn't need to be that way. And it doesn't need a lot of water. In closing, I'd like to thank our dedicated water department employees. They are a fantastic bunch to work with. They are dedicated to this city and doing their job and serving our customers to the best of their abilities, and I thank them every day for that. Questions?
Well, one of the reasons that I asked you to come tonight is when you last shared the water usage and the two biggest consumers being the school district and the city, it concerns me because I don't think that it's sustainable. So I hope, recognizing how we're always bumping up against the edge of how much water we can generate through our pumps and our reservoirs, that we can continue to look at even different kinds of grasses. I know that down in Palm Springs, Palm Desert area, they have grasses that don't require a lot of water, and I think we can't take for granted the resource that we have. We better start looking at ways to landscape and irrigate differently so that we do keep that aquifer flowing. Yes.
Sure. I would have a question. When we talk about, efficiency and getting it up, from 30-something to 60-something, like we've got a guy who, for several, put in our sprinkler system, and then he comes and blows it out and checks the valve. But so I'm guessing maybe he could. But for people who are hearing this and say, well, yeah, I would like to know what is my efficiency of my system now. We know about the tips about if you see this kind of a sprinkler head or adjust it, but how would somebody really know how to rate your efficiency now or in the future?
That's done through what you call a water audit, and you can actually do those yourselves relatively easily. The Idaho Washington Aquifer website has a portion on it called Outdoor Watering Nerds, and it's a very detailed website that walks you through the steps of doing a water audit, tells you about a lot of different tips you can do to upgrade your system. Most of them simply changing sprinkler heads.
Yeah.
Going to NP rotators, which are match precipitation rotators, which use about half to a fourth of the water that a typical irrigation sprinkler head does, and still has the same coverage, less water loss through wind drift and everything, but it's a larger spray pattern, and very simple to do. A few $100, you could probably retrofit a lot of the systems that way. But there are several different websites that the standard or the normal person can utilize to find that.
Are they on our site anywhere if somebody is?
There's a link in the
Yeah.
Water Department's
Great,
website.
great.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Terry, you were referring to the aquifer, and you said it had a 60-foot-a-day flow. A 60-foot.
Maximum, yes.
That means that's how it's moving. That's not a depth, right?
No, it's not depth. That's moving through the aquifer horizontally.
Okay. And thank you for coming. I do appreciate it. I know there's been some, when I heard on the radio about Spokane, I was concerned. Then Mr. Tymason floated the idea to me about the odd even watering, and I was very unexcited about that. But because I said, the city uses water, we should start leading that first before we start telling people what to do. You said, what can we do now? You had a list. Encouraging conservation from customers, I absolutely agree with that. I like the idea of having options about zero-scape and so on. I am not in favor of an ordinance to provide limitation on watering times. I don't want to be the water police. And I do not want an ordinance requiring minimum irrigation efficiencies. To me, that's more government. I'm also opposed to working with the Planning Commission to reduce green space requirements. I think green space is something that's really important. I do, however, want to consider when we do zonings and annexations that we are aware of the water situation, and when that comes up, we need to know how are we doing. And I know that study that you talked about is coming up. That's going to be a lot of good information, but this is going to be a concern because in the past when we've done annexations and upgrades and zone upgrades, the water department has said, hey, we're good. Capacity's good. So if it's not good, we need to hear it.
Yep.
I also like the idea of reusing the water for irrigation from the wastewater treatment plant. I know that stuff's really good. Mr. Anderson is here. He's our director for the wastewater treatment plant, and I know they do a phenomenal job. And sometimes the stuff they put in the river is better than the stuff that's already in the river. So if there was some way we had to use that in our own parks, that would really help you a lot. And of course, I've been complaining about that or mentioning that for years now. So I agree with that too. Otherwise, thank you so much for this information. I do appreciate it. And thank you for this, the wonderful
Yeah.
thing. I'm so disappointed you gave it to the rest of council, though. I was hoping it was just be me. Saying, I visited him today and had a chat. So, and then he goes, oh, we'll give these to the rest of council too. Why? Thank you.
That's enough.
We have to share.
Couple of questions. So when you started out, we're sort of peaking or maxing out.
Yes.
And I've heard people say, well, that means we're going to be using all the water out of the aquifer and we should stop growing, stop building. When you do a well, when you find a well that pumps what you need, and you call it reservoirs, I call them tanks, right? Same thing. So the water we pump out through a pump goes into the reservoir. Is that correct?
It actually goes in directly into the system. The excess is pushed to the reservoirs for additional storage. We don't pump directly to a reservoir and then use it from there.
So when you start maxing out, try and make me understand, that means all the reservoirs are full and you're still pumping,
We're pumping at our maximum rate of 34,000 GPM.
and that's based around the
And the
wells.
usage exceeds that 34,000 GPM.
So how do you increase that from your perspective? Another
My
well?
perspective, you're adding a well.
A well with a tank?
Well, no, you're adding a well. You
Okay.
get another 4,000 GPM,
Okay,
4,000 gallons per minute. The problem is that's $1.5 million right off the bat before you even get it pumping. And right now, 8 of our wells sit idle for 7 to 9 months of the year. That's an expense that's in the business world would be impossible to justify. In ours, it's a necessity. If we could find some other way to utilize that infrastructure to have somebody balance that that cost, I mean, it would be better, but eventually we're going to get to the point where we can't simply afford to do it and we can't get the water rights to do it. At the state level, as I mentioned, they're looking at changing how water rights are granted. Right now, it's targeted for irrigation, but we fear that they may move towards domestic use as well.
so when you talked about landscaping, and I'm the same way, I drive up and down the streets at those hours and you see sprinklers in the street and things.
Yep.
Most of the places I see are big landscaping companies that manage it. In the perfect world, without water police, let's say, would they be responsible for keeping the control of the sprinklers or looking at them? Because
They-
most of them do the work early in the morning and then the sprinklers on at 2 o'clock in
Right.
the afternoon.
Right, and that's a lot of the problem I mentioned with maintenance is you should be testing, or at least looking at your irrigation system once a week. Just kick it on manually, check it.
Oh.
I don't know how many times, I drove down Maria the other day, and down there by Winco, there was 4 sprinkler heads that were busted off and just spraying straight in the air in the afternoon. So they need to be checked on a routine basis, and that's commercial, industrial, residential even. People walk by, kick the head off, you accidentally hit it with a mower, don't realize it, so that's a lot of the loss there as well.
Another thing you talked about was our reasonable prices of water. And it's not like we can just raise the price to try and make you feel like you need to conserve. It doesn't work that way, does it?
No, we can, by state code, we can only raise it as much or basically only as much as we need to have to maintain the system. We really can't go crazy with it. I mean, there's probably some that do, but in our minds, we don't do that. We try to encourage it as much as we can with a little bit of a stepped rate, but you would have to double or triple the rate in order to be able to really encourage people to conserve, in my opinion.
So places that do that are not Idaho. Is that the impression I got?
I'm not going to say that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Christie.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the type of landscaping that the city's doing. And I know that you've worked with the Parks Department, and I want to give them a little bit of a plug, because on the Atlas site, they certainly are trying to go a different direction.
Yep.
Most beautiful clover down there, doesn't require really any mowing, and not a lot of water. And actually, it's kind of funny, because if you look at some yards, including my own, I seem to have a lot of that clover myself mixed in. And so I thought, oh, I wonder how, that might not be so bad in the future to have that kind of clover.
Yep.
But I also would say that I know the college, when they acquired the mill site, the lines were there to draw water out of the river. And I believe the college is doing a lot of that, and maybe even Atlas, I thought we left that capability there.
Yep.
And so those are some things the city is trying to do.
Yes.
And I know they're working well with you, Terry, on that. So it's encouraging, and if there's other areas of town where we could put that clover, maybe we should be looking at that.
They've been looking at doing that on Ramsey in the center dividers, trying it as a kind of an experiment there, and taking out the irrigation systems, probably putting in a little bit of drip irrigation, which is 100% efficient. So that's one of the programs they've been looking at, and we do applaud that, and we've helped them with the water rights on the Atlas Mill site for that park, so that they could maintain drawing out of the river, and it's built to do that. I don't know how well it's functioning, but Mr. Greenwood could give you an idea on that. But yes, they did the clover there, and it took a little bit of experimenting to get it to work, but it's another avenue.
Yeah.
The problem we have with a lot of the green space for development is turf's cheap to install. It takes a lot of maintenance, takes a lot of water, but the developer gets in, does a low-cost, green space, and walks off. And then the city or the homeowner association is left to maintain it.
Yeah.
There is a way to cut that green space in half and do the other half in low water use landscaping. It's a little bit more expensive up front, but it's just as attractive as some of the pictures I showed you, and requires almost no water. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking about when I talk about reducing green space, is turning it into low water use landscaping.
Sure, yeah. Is your presentation going to be on the city website?
I believe so.
Excellent. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you very much, Terry, for coming tonight
you.
and sharing that. I think it's just the start of discussion that we'll have to continue working with the Parks Department and the schools particularly. Dan Gookin is right. We need to lead the charge in terms of conservation, and we can't ask others to do what we're not willing to do ourselves. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Announcements? Christie?
One quick one. You had mentioned the fires in Maui, and tonight, Mr. Mayor, Athol is being evacuated. Those are our neighbors and our friends, and so I was hoping that our administration can maybe find out tomorrow if there's a Red Cross post set up for them and how we can help. And I would hope the citizens of Coeur d'Alene would do everything they could to give people water, food, supplies. I'm not sure how bad it is right now, but they're being evacuated, and I think they've lost at least one building. So,
Thank you.
thoughts to them.
Kiki?
Just a reminder that on there's 2 open positions coming up soon, a library trustee position and a historic preservation commission position. So if you're interested in serving on those, contact the city.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval of consent calendar as presented, including Resolution 23061.
Second.
Motion is second. Discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk take the roll, please?
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Aye.
McEvers?
Yes.
Guggen?
Yeah.
English?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Public comment? Oh, it's right here. Nick? Nick Goodwin? Welcome, Nick.
Hello, thanks for having me. Nick Goodwin, President of LCA. I live in Hayden, Idaho, but I work here in Coeur d'Alene, as you all know. I don't have anything written down, so I'm going to go off the cuff here tonight. But I wanted to come, as you all know, you're going to see the LCA agreement, 2-year agreement, come to you for consideration tonight. I want to start off once again thanking the council for the public service that you give and the relationship that we've had with this council and the support we've received from you in the past and we hope to receive in the future. I want to thank the administration for the quality work that they did with the LCA negotiating team. We're very fortunate to have a very professional and good relationship with our administration with similar goals to make this a great place to work. We're hoping to see you guys support this contract proposal tonight. We hope that you see the value in the employees using the ARPA funds to supplement some of the cost of living needs that we've heard from our members. We think that taking that step is going to help people that are dealing with the expanded cost of living in our area get back on the right track, and hopefully get them through the winter and use those funds to help the people that help the city get through and support our public safety officers and fire department deal with the pandemic as we all got through it as a city, as a team. So I thank you for considering this proposal tonight. It did pass our membership by 99% vote. So the LCA members are behind it, we're behind it, and we thank you guys for the support that we always get and your service. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. Diana Sheridan? Good evening.
Diana Sheridan. Good evening. My first comment concerns public comment and where it is in the sequencing on the agenda. So I went back through a few years' worth of agendas and saw that actually the consent agenda was after public comment. So it actually gave the citizens here the opportunity to be able to speak to what was going to be on a consent agenda. For some reason, at some point in time, it's been rearranged so that public comment comes after the consent agenda. So you've already voted on it, and there's no way to make comment on it that would be impactful to you all if you've already voted on it. So I'm requesting that it be resequenced so there's actually an opportunity for feedback from the community. That's number one. Number two, a while back, one of the consent agendas had to do with the purchasing of 7 new cameras. And so I came in a few weeks later and said, wow, we didn't have an opportunity to ask questions or give questions to you or give any feedback. So at that time I said, I asked what we knew about where that data was being stored for those 7 cameras. Thank you, Councilman Gookin. You gave me a connection with Lieutenant Tilson from the CDA Police, and I met with him, and I wanted to give you the feedback of what he told me, which is that all that data is kept on a cloud-based system. It is not managed or held by the city. It is held by a third party. That third party is Vigilant, which is a division of Motorola, and our CDA Police have access to that through a portal with specific access items, such as they have to have a case number for a police incident. So, thank you for the opportunity to bring this back to you, and I'm going to close with asking that we juggle the order of the public comment in the future, for future agendas. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Metter? So that's, you just wanted to, you don't wish to speak as well? No. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Question for you, Mr. Mayor. So how do we change the agenda? I know that's, you set the agenda, I think. How do we change the order if we want to? Because I remember council comments used to come after public comments too, so.
Yeah.
It's something we can look at.
Well, actually, it's, other than if we're going to do it before the consent agenda, that's about as far up as we could move it.
Okay.
So it wouldn't make any difference in the organization other than putting it first.
Excellent, thank you.
So we'll do public comment first and then go on to the consent agenda. Okay, Terry, you're back up.
Thank you. You heard me talk about water rights a little bit ago. Our groundwater rights are pretty much assigned. We've maintained what we have there. Our surface water rights for the lake, we lost about half of what we originally were assigned because we could not justify those. As part of that adjudication process, we found out that there are other water rights on the lake, not only for the tribe, but for Avista and the governor's office. We began in negotiation for the past year and a half with both the tribe and the Avista and the governors as an interested party in maintaining water pool levels for the lake. Recently, we were notified by our water rights attorney, Candace McHugh of McHugh Bromley out of Boise, that they had achieved an agreement between Avista and the governor's office, and we need to get that signed. So our water rights attorney is requesting signatory authority to sign our portion of the water rights agreement. There's another negotiation that was going on between the tribe, the state, and the federal government that we were a party to. That has since fallen through. We've encouraged the governor to try to resume those negotiations, but that's been unsuccessful at this point. But this is a separate agreement. It'll maintain the summer pool levels for the lake at 2126.9. That's a little bit less than what was originally 2128, but it still maintains the ability for Avista to be able to generate water from the lake. It maintains our ability to be able to recreate on the lake. The tribe was looking to restore historic levels, which would drop the lake levels 18 to 23 feet. So this water right will hopefully maintain that. It maintains the stipends that were put in place that Avista pays the various organizations. And so I'm just asking for signatory authority for our attorney to be able to sign that agreement.
Terry, did I hear you say that it's going to drop, 8/10 of a foot for summer level?
Yeah, basically, yes. Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions?
Just, Terry, if you could, talk about how any of it's going to impact dock owners on the lake. Will it be noticeable?
It won't be noticeable for the dock owners, no, I don't believe so, because we're talking less than a foot.
Okay.
So, what the tribe was wanting to do, you wouldn't be able to use a lot of the docks in the lake. So this will maintain that summer pool level where we want it to be, and it'll maintain the water flow over the dam, so.
Okay, thank you.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Adams, our packet includes a lot of this legal stuff, which is deliberately confusing. And I just wanted to know so is this just basically the legalistic language of what Mr. Pickle has explained in English?
It is. This is an agreement between, you should remember, it's an agreement between the governor and Avista in a litigation that involves multiple parties, including the city. But the city is not technically a party to this agreement. We're a signatory. We're agreeing to their settlement. And I think Terry would confirm that the tribal end of things is still in litigation, and we don't know how that's going to end up. Well, it may go to trial, and that may affect a lot of water rights as well.
Are other cities on Lake Coeur d'Alene participating in this? I know that we're the big ones, but I mean, like Harrison?
Harrison is, yes.
Okay, they are. All right, good to know. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of stuff in here, and
It
it's
is.
confusing.
That's what was
'cause it's like-
transmitted to me from the attorney as an example of what we were looking at, so.
Yeah, because it's the same thing, like several times with different things crossed out. It's like, it's crazy. So, thank you.
Woody?
So I'm trying to understand how the tribe and us and Avista, how's the governor fit into this?
The governor's office has had a water right on the lake, I think it's 1 million acre feet per year, for as long as I know of, so.
Really?
Yes.
Since 1927, I think.
Yeah.
The governor has water rights on Lake Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah, and I believe that was designed to help preserve irrigation capacity within the reservoir itself, so.
Okay, and so the dream for the tribe is to get back down to before the dam.
Correct,
that-
because they have flooded lands that remain flooded throughout the year that they can no longer use. Vista does give them a stipend for the property that's impacted. They would rather have the property back. That's what I was told in the process. So,
So we've been feeding the attorneys for a couple of years now on this?
since 2011,
Oh, my. So do
That's
we
when
get
they-
out of it now if we sign? Are we
that
done?
we get out of that portion of it. We still have the tribes portion of it. That's going to be ongoing probably for another couple of years.
So we just kind
I
of
was
pay
hoping
the
to have
attorney.
it done before I left, but
Yes.
didn't
I
quite work.
appreciate you trying.
Yeah.
So you don't see any compromise with the tribe?
Nothing yet.
So for them, it's all
We
or
were
nothing?
almost at an agreement, and they went into, it was time for reelection of their board members or the elders, council elders, and some positions changed, and they pulled out completely.
That's education, right?
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
How does council wish to act on this recommendation?
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion to approve the authorization for legal counsel to sign on behalf of the city the settlement agreement between the state of Idaho and Avista to preserve the historic use of the lake, complying with Avista's FERC requirements, and maintain the lake at summer, fall, winter levels, as has been normal and customary for decades.
I'll second that.
I have a motion, a second. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, will the clerk take the roll, please? Oh, I can just do this by hand. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Hi, Chris.
Good evening. Do you want me just to get started then?
Go ahead, yes, please.
Thanks for having me before you. I'm here to ask you permission to enter an agreement with Welch Comer Engineers for design of it's the preliminary design of our Government Way corridor, which will be used towards a Strategic Initiatives grant program. So this grant program the grant application is due in September, and with that grant application, it asks 5 or 6 questions. One of those questions is, how ready are the plans? That can be up to 20 points out of 100 points if you had shovel-ready plans. In our case, we are just getting started, so we're hoping to get about half of those points if we get this thing underway, because the grant application allows that if the project can be done within a certain amount of time, a few months, then it'll get more points. So that's what we're looking to do. Now I'll describe what we're planning to do with this money. The Strategic Initiatives Grant is, you can ask for up to $10 million. They warned us that's not advisable to ask for $10 million because it's going to be harder to fund too many projects like that with their pot of money. So we're looking in the $5 to $6 million range. And so what we'd like to do is take Government Way, which is 10 independent signals at this time. Each of those signals operates independently. What we'd like to do is upgrade each of those signals and provide communication between each of those signals through radios to talk back and forth so that we can create a coordinated corridor through there. So we'd be upgrading the pedestrian push buttons and pedestrian lights on those, and the pedestrian ramps if they are out of compliance. And we'd also be upgrading detection and other things like that in the signal cabinets. So when we're done, we should be able to program these to get a they call it a green wave, when you can drive from one signal to the next and keep hitting a green. Right now, if you're lucky, you can do that. I've done it a few times myself. Other times, you're cussing because you run into a red light over and over again. So with this, that's what we're trying to accomplish. So we'd like to get this contract started with Welch Comer Engineers so that they can begin the design of that and help us with this grant application to increase our chances of awarding this funding. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Yes.
Chris, I see that the southernmost street looks like where it starts is Harrison. Is that-
Correct.
I think, am I correct in the the further south, the last one is northwest. If you go down the hill,
Yes.
but is there a reason we're not including that one?
That
Or is
one
it
was-
too far?
Well, that one was included with the Sherman update that we did just recently. So we went
Perfect.
from there all the way over to Fifth Street. So we have a coordinated system there. We have some on Northwest Boulevard from Lakewood to Golf Course. And now we're trying to get some on Government Way as well.
Perfect, thanks.
Woody?
Couple things. Did I read that this was going to address right turns,
Left turns.
the flashing yellow?
Right, so, and some of our, we do have flashing yellows or green arrows at some of the signals, others don't, and we're looking to upgrade those where it makes sense to do so.
Okay. It sounded like a lot of the upgrades are directed at pedestrians. Is that true, or is it just the way I heard it?
Well, it tends to be a big portion of it, because once we start playing around with the pedestrian push buttons and things like that, then we've got to upgrade the ramps as well. So it gets a little expensive there, but it's something we should be doing anyway.
So the PEDs don't necessarily impact the green lights and things like that, or the cross traffic?
Well, they can extend a green light in one direction if somebody pushes the button.
Oh, I
They don't
see.
automatically affect the signal, but they can extend a green light in one direction or hold a red longer because of the time for someone to
Okay.
cross.
Trying to picture how that works. Thank you.
Yes, Christie.
Thank you. Chris, we recently heard from the chief of police about Highway 95, and that the 7 miles of the city that 95 encompasses is the highest accident rate in the entire state of Idaho. So that's crashed cars, people going to the hospital, and lots of expense. The issue is that the lights are not synchronized. Do you have any sort of stats of Government Way? I mean, it's great that we could maybe do something. We can't do anything on 95, we don't control it. But for Government Way, what's your knowledge of the kind of accidents we're dealing with?
I haven't dove into the accident types too much. That will be a part of the grant application, though. That's something we're supposed to look into. But I don't know what the majority of crashes are at each of those intersections, because I haven't gone to that level of detail.
Okay. The synchronized lights, though, should alleviate, from what I understand. If we could have that on 95, we'd have a lot less of the carnage that's going on there.
Right, when people keep running into red lights, they get frustrated, and then they tend to run those red lights, and that's where safety problems are a big concern.
And they try to cross, they try to get across the road, and so there's been some concern about what kind of cameras these lights might possess. And from what I understand, there's no interest in cameras for any kind of surveillance. This is 100% about synchronizing lights so we can have effective traffic flow. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so we use detection cameras that pointed at the stop bars, and when a vehicle pulls into the stop bar area, it makes a little blue box on a screen to show that detection, it has trip detection and told the signal that somebody is there. So this is the new technology that we've been, well, it's not that new, but we've been going to those on a lot because they have fewer problems than some of the other detection types that we've used in the past. They're not very high resolution. I mean, this camera up here that's pointed at us now has way more capability than the cameras at those stop bars. But they are specifically there to see a vehicle arrive and then make a tally that that vehicle has arrived. So we get traffic counts from those also. They can even count pedestrians as they cross the crosswalks because it's a different motion that they're making there.
Thank you.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, to continue what Christy was saying, there's a tremendous concern out there, as you saw with the KMPO and the Traffic or Transportation Management Center, regarding cameras and the ability to spy on people and stuff. And one of the alternatives, of course, is always the light timing, and this is going to help with the light timing. But as far as the process goes, I received a couple of questions today regarding what type of cameras are going to be used and the more information. That's why I asked you for the proposal, the grant proposal. So right now, we don't know anything about the types of cameras or the system. I mean, there's what you would like to get. But as far as anything written down, any requirements, any prerequisites, any government strings, we don't know anything.
No, and we've used the strategic initiatives funding in the past, like when we did the Atlas Road improvements at Industrial Loop. And this grant we really like because it has the fewest strings attached. They just give us the money, we do the job, and when we're done, we send back what we didn't use, hopefully none, and then take photos to document everything. And they use that also to show the governor, hey, look at all these great things we did with the money. Please keep funding this program.
Well, good. And for the $45,000 to Welsh Comer, they're going to be, I think, is this the one that had the list? No, that's that 15th Street. They're going to be compiling just a list of all the stuff that would need to be done kind of for the grant, or what is their role here?
Well, they're starting with that. We've got a lot of that information already, but they will be putting the design on paper and getting closer to a biddable project. And that's the goal here, is that in a short amount of time, if we get this funding, we'd be able to advertise for bids and get this corridor upgraded.
Okay, so they would be the ones who would select the type of camera, the type of system, the electronics, the communications, all that stuff?
With our input, and they will communicate with our signal vendor that we use. They know the type of equipment we like to use, what's compatible with what we have, and all that. So.
And this works with our system.
Correct.
So it's not something that could be co-opted. That was one issue, I know I talked to Todd about that, is that if they did do the Transportation Management Center, we would have to change our system to match their system. So this is what we prefer, not what someone else prefers.
That's true.
And when it comes back, if we get the grant and everything goes forward, that will be part of the public process. It's going to be an agenda item. It's not a hearing, but it's going to be something that people can read and comment on.
For sure.
Thank you.
Dan?
Related to the safety, and I think you mentioned too, some of the traffic signals on Northwest Boulevard and up, a little past the freeway, and just on my mind because coming tonight for the second time, I think, seems like within a month. I mean, I saw an injury accident right there by that, Ramsey and the fire station and the back of Winco, and where we kind of did some improvements to get into the ITD. And it just strikes me, if I've seen two in the last month right there when I happen to be, do you know anything? I mean, what's up with that intersection? Do you know?
I'm not sure the cause of those crashes. I can certainly look into it, get the crash reports from the police department on that and find out why. But unfortunately,
Okay,
even the best running system, people are going to have accidents because
right. It just seems probability that I'd be, but
yes, it
yeah.
seems high.
And the two times I saw it looked like, some kind of, serious damage and or injury. So anyway, that's just something for the radar. Thanks.
I've heard concern expressed about cameras. When we started out with traffic signals, they were all just timed. And even if nobody was coming in the other direction, you had to wait until the timer clicked it over to your cycle. And then we went to the wires buried in the ground that actuated the signal. And then those would break, or sometimes they wouldn't actually recognize the vehicle, particularly a motorcycle. And so then we went to cameras, and I'm a strong supporter of the cameras because they're low enough resolution that I've never heard of them being used to try to find a criminal or anything like that, because the resolution's too low to be able to do that. But they are the best means of technology right now to detect vehicles that are sitting in the lane so that you aren't going back to the old-fashioned timed kind of situation where you had to sit and wait whether there was traffic oncoming or not. Okay, anybody ready for a motion on this?
I will go ahead and make a motion to approve Resolution 23062, which is approving a professional services agreement with Welsh Comer Engineers, the Government Way Strategic Initiative Funding and Phase 1 Preliminary Signal Upgrade and Coordination Design in the amount of $45,000.
Second?
We have a motion, a second.
And Mr. Mayor, like I said earlier, so this money comes from our impact fees. So when it comes back, if we get the grant, we're going to go ahead and be really transparent, tell everyone all about the cameras and how the system works to allay those fears that are out there about using the cameras. And it's not really the traffic cameras, Mr. Mayor, it's the ability to put other things on there that can be used to do things other than traffic. That's one of the concerns.
Yeah, I was going to say, I could show you photos in my next presentation of what the cameras are seeing, but if the fear is swapping out those cameras or adding to them, that's not going to address that. But I can still put what that image looks like.
Right.
Just
And these are not the cameras, as Ms. Sheridan spoke about earlier, these are not those, the police cameras.
Correct.
Which serve a completely different purpose, and they aren't even looking at traffic. They're looking at traffic going away, not traffic coming toward. So, anyway, thank you.
Will the clerk take the roll, please?
Miller. Aye. McEvers.
Yes.
Gookin.
Yep.
English.
Yes.
Wood.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Next two items are Troy. We have a couple of agreements that have been negotiated. Troy?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. I bring before you the agreement that you heard about in public comment from the Lake City Employees Association for your consideration. We spent a number of meetings going over this. It was very much approved by the LCEA members. It is and has been a good contract. So the pieces I bring to you tonight are modifications to a really good contract. LCEA wanted to go with a 2-year term. I did work hard to extend that, but they stuck with that. On point number 2, they and the city wanted to increase the number of hours that accrue for new hires. That is existing in other contracts. We know that it's a competitive market to hire people, so moving that up, we were totally in concert with as well. LCEA, through a number of negotiations, is seeking a 5% market adjustment for the next fiscal year, and in year 2, it would be a 3% market adjustment for their wages. The agreement also includes a reduction in the pay grade from minimum to maximum. Currently, it's 9 years. We're proposing that it goes to 7 years. It levels that off in the last couple of years, and that is consistent with fire and longer than what's in police. In this negotiation, because there was the cost of living increases that were greater than what the cost of living or the market adjustments were in the past, we negotiated a one-time bonus paid to all members of LCEA at $2,500, and that would be paid in the second pay date in October of this year. As you know, our fiscal year begins October 1. Not that we ever want that pandemic thing to come back, but a new hire that comes in and has something go wrong early, which we witnessed during COVID primarily, causes a situation where they don't have enough leave. So they have negotiated a leave of 32 hours before that would be accrued. There's parameters on that, there's doctor's notes and everything else. So this is probably a very low-used benefit, but it is a good what-if. In the event that a person is called out at night and they happen to be on standby, they have negotiated adding a 2-hour minimum. So if a person gets called out to the job site and it takes an hour, they will be paid for those 2 hours. That classically is at a non-work hour. So the last item that was negotiated is a $500 annual tool allowance for streets and engineering mechanics. It is designed to replace tools that they may bring in. It has to be approved by the director. It's all done on the front end, and it is basically assisting individuals that are using their own tools to replace those that are broken. So with that and many, many hours and a huge thank you to the HR director and the director of legal services, we bring before you the contract as we negotiated it. I would stand for any questions you might have.
Woody?
So mechanics don't use city tools?
They use some city tools. However, the mechanics in this department have the bulk of their tools are their own.
32 hours, the early 32 hours, bad thing happens, do they pay that back?
We get it back over time.
Okay.
Yes, it is paid back.
And bonus, is that a kind of a new norm, or just, have
It
we
won't
done
be a new
bonus?
norm for this city because we classically don't have extra dollars, but during this unique period of time, we negotiated a bonus with your fire union. They had savings on breathing apparatus, and in this situation, we had ARPA dollars that can be used for this type of an expense.
All right, thank you.
Christie?
Troy, Councilman Gookin and I had the opportunity to sit in on some of the negotiations, and I would just like to really echo what you said, that it was well done. Everyone was very respectful, and sometimes, negotiations get pretty tense. Not that everyone is not professional, it's a very difficult topic sometimes. And I would just, I'd like to compliment both your staff and the LCEA bargaining team for working really hard to try to come to some kind of an agreement that the city can support and they can accept for their members. We know that in talking with them, and in certainly talking the last several years about the cost of living in this area and how it has been incredibly difficult for people with, certainly at a lower wage scale, trying to just cope. And our city employees are, we think they're the best, and we want to keep them. We want them to be able to afford to live here. And I think any chance that we have to be fair and to support them any way we can, I think that's the right thing to do.
Thank you, council member. And your work in increasing what the cost of living was in the LCEA contract 1 year ago, coming from a individual that's in that business, they had never seen that done before. And so think about that. If you had a contract and somebody wanted to pay you more than what you'd contracted to, that does not happen ever. So with your wisdom and your foresight, knowing that an urban renewal district does not close every year, you use the cash flow to balance it amongst all your team members, including a union, including an association, and a second association. So that was a piece that you don't get thanked enough for, that LCEA and its representatives brought forward in this negotiation multiple times.
Kiki?
I just wanted to say, I think based on possibly Nick's comments during public comment, that my consternation regarding the use of ARPA funds here in this particular contract must have gotten back to him. I think our original conversation, Nick had said that most of this LCEA group was not housing and financially constrained, and they didn't expect to get all of that ARPA dollar funding. So I had that in the back of my mind, and so I still really support our staff. I'm glad that we've been able to come through for them in the past. I still disagree with the ARPA dollars being used in this negotiation and in the contract.
Would stand for a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I would make a motion to approve resolution number 23-063, approving a 2-year collective bargaining agreement with the Lake City Employee Association.
Second.
You have a motion, a second. Seeing no further discussion, will the clerk take the roll, please?
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Yep.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion carries. The next item is a similar item with a smaller group.
It is a smaller group for the captains of your police department. Mayor and council, the HR department is going to work over this next fiscal year to work on a compensation plan that makes sure that all the directors, all the legal experts that we have, your deputy chiefs, all fit into what I'm going to call the executive level, and it stratifies amongst all the groups. The reason you're doing a 2-year with our captains is the fact that we had hoped to get that done quicker, but there was a couple negotiations we did this year with fire and police. So what does that mean? That means that the captains will be looked at in the macro look in police. We put in some details in here that help with that. Our police captains have asked for what the Police Officers Association have received for their market adjustments. They have not asked for anything more, and it ties to the term remaining with our Police Officers Association. What the paragraph is that we wrote up is the captains are leveled in the overall plan in the pay structure. The wages per the MOU place them in a grade 19. They're 9.4% below the police chief. If that was 1.4%, we would have a real contraction up there. That's not the normal buffer between a captain and a chief. But we are in pretty good shape today. Fire chief and city attorney are also in there. They are leveled at a pay grade 20. The administrator, myself, is a pay grade 21. Deputy fire chiefs are an 18, as well as our directors and department heads. So we're leveled pretty well at the moment, and going forward, we know what the next couple of years will bring. So we're going to look at the directors, deputy chiefs, as well as the captains and legal to make sure we're balanced in what the market is paying, where the medians are for that group, so that our pay structure stays solid. It is a real strength to be a preferred employer so that we can continue to draw in the best of the best. And so with that, I would stand for any questions on this update to the police captain's memorandum of understanding.
Woody?
So let me, a director is 18, is that what you said?
Correct.
And the chiefs are 19? And now the captains are 19?
Correct.
And that's based off what the police got? And that's,
Yep.
okay, so that's what brought them into 19?
Correct.
Okay, trying to pick.
Yes, I
but
apologize on all
no,
those
that's
different
okay.
numbers on
So
that.
that's what you got to work on to fix, get it balanced,
I
yes?
think it'll probably get stratified in another way so that it's 18 and a half or something fun in the world of trying to categorize that.
Okay,
18 and 3/4, you got
very
it.
creative, I like that. Thank you.
Yes, Christie.
Thank you. Troy, I've worked with a lot of police captains over the years. And starting with your brother-in-law, Chief Cronin, he certainly changed the way captains work and their level of responsibility. When I was a young patrolman, the captains went out for coffee most of the day. That's not the case. In today's world, they're some of the hardest working people in the police department with an incredible amount of responsibility. So I understand why you have got them at that level. There's only a couple of them, and when the chief is not available, it all falls to them with that level of responsibility. And they also work a ton of overtime. They're out at night. Well, I say overtime, but we don't pay them. But they're out at night just because that's what they're required to do. And so I don't have an issue with their MOU. I think it's been negotiated in good faith on both parties, and I'm proud to support them. I think they do a fantastic job for the city of Coeur d'Alene.
So, yes, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to talk about the pay grade structure. And I've said this before in some of our other meetings, that I'm glad you're looking at it, because I think it's broken. It's 20 years old. It needs to be updated and to reflect the accurate way that we pay our people. So I would really look forward to seeing that. What I don't want to see is it devolve into the kind of system they have at the county, where there are thousands of pay grades and subgrades and split grades and all this stuff. So moving forward on that, you definitely have my support. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that'll be an upgrade on the pay grades.
An upgrade to the pay grade, which we will grade as a council.
Christie, would you like to?
I'd love to make that motion, thank you. I make a motion to approve resolution number 23-064, approving a 2-year police captain memorandum of understanding, establishing compensation and benefits.
Second.
Motion is second. Seeing no further discussion, will the clerk take the roll, please?
McEvers?
Yes.
Guggen?
Yep.
English?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Aye.
Final design for 15th Street, Harrison to Best.
Good morning, or good evening, Mayor and council members.
Morning.
No, we don't want to be morning yet.
It's always morning.
I'm excited to bring this to you tonight. When I started with the city of Coeur d'Alene 10 years ago, I remember hearing about 15th Street and it was going to be reconstructed. And it's a long history there. I'm excited that we've found a firm that is walking us through this process. One of the things we need to seriously look at because of the size of the project is we need to find some federal funding or something. Engineers' estimates for this project right now, which will probably change, are just north of $7 million to do what we need to do. So what we need to do is get to what they refer to as shovel ready. We need to have a plan. We need to have it ready to go so we can go after certain kind of funding, and then hopefully we can move forward. This is a long process to get to a final design. The discouraging part of this is if we approve this tonight, 25 is probably the soonest that we will see final design documents. One of the reasons for that, this section of 15th Street, there was a floodplain. Just to work through that floodplain, the minute they get all the information, it's 12 months for them to do what they do. So they'll be working on other stuff while they're working on the floodplain, but it takes time. So we're still a couple of years out before we can even look at anything as far as construction. What we're looking at doing with this project, basically, there's been some concern, but we would start at Harrison, about 100 feet north of Harrison, and we would work north all the way to Best on this drawing. The first section from Harrison up to roughly where the fire station is, that's going to be work that we're probably going to do some upgrades to the lighting. We're going to mill the edges and do an overlay and chip seal over that. The reason is, as we all know, ITD is working on a plan for that interchange, the on and off ramps. So we don't want to put a lot of money into that section because we still don't know what that looks like. But the road is failing and we have to do something. The lighting was installed there in the mid-60s. It's failing. It's kind of a dark intersection. So we'd really like to get some upgrades to the lighting with some LED. Once we get to where the fire station is right here, moving in front of a Vista, we're going to do a complete reconstruct. So the whole road would be removed, new curbs, sidewalk, there would be a mixed-use path. This is all part of the design. As we get to the entrance to our Cherry Hill facility, there would be an RRFB with a crosswalk that goes across, is what we've asked for to get people into the park from that housing development to the west. There's a little bit of right-of-way that has to be purchased. As we move past the Vista, the road gets a little narrow there. It's not a lot, but there's some Vista poles in the way. So we're working through that to figure out what that's going to look like. There's small right-of-way adjustments as you move to the west on 15th through this section here. It's a slight uphill grade change, and so in order to make the pedestrian pedestrian improvements, we're going to have to buy a little right-of-way to stretch it out and make some more room. And then there'll be improvements at 15th and Best. There'll be some sewer improvements. The whole intersection, we're not looking to remove the poles completely, but there would be a significant upgrade there with push buttons and things like that, new heads, new cabinet, stuff to control it, new forms of detection that we would bring forward with this design. So anyway, it's a big project for us. we are looking for a way to fund this project, and that's what I come to you tonight for. We're requesting approval for a contract with Adura, formerly known as TO. They were bought out by another company, same people that we've been working with. And we would like to get to a final design. We have some designated funds from last year and this year that we'd like to use from the highway user fees to fund this, get to final design. That number is $683,700. It seems like a lot, but when you look at it on the size of the project, it kind of matches. We've done some checking. It seems like we're in the ballpark. And this price should get us through the bid process, is what they're hoping for. It's not for construction. This does all the design and get us into the bid process. So at this time, I would take any questions.
Well, before we start on questions, I want to say that this is a project that has been kicked down the road several times over the years. And I think it's time that we finally get a final design ready so that we can go after funds to complete this project. Woody?
Oh, Todd, you said something on the top map about a crosswalk. Where does it come from?
So there's a crosswalk on both sides. On west side in front of Avista, there's a crosswalk that people can go north to from the housing development back there. And so that would be a way for them to walk down the crosswalk, safely cross 15th Street to go to our the BMX track or the pickleball courts or any of that stuff over
But
there.
no light, just a crosswalk.
It'll be the RFBs, the flashing push button activated lights.
And then I noticed McFarland has some sort of a big intersection in it. Where does that go to?
I think that's just how it looks there. That's one of the spots where you have to shift the road a little bit. There's that development up in there. That's one of the spots we have to buy a little more right of way, and we're making the road a little wider. So I think it just appears that it's going to be the same amount of lanes. It's not going to be, it's not really much bigger than the other intersection.
But no crosswalk there?
No.
Okay, that's what I was picturing going. Stormwater comes from where? Is that all the way up at Best, and it has to go where?
So it's a tricky spot because out of, there's a creek, if you will, that comes into that area that creates the floodplain, and it actually crosses 15th. And so we're looking to reduce the amount of stormwater because all of this, believe it or not, eventually can make it down to the lake. And so all the stuff from Best heading south will actually go into a ditch that ITD owns, and then our stormwater systems kind of commingle, and then they keep heading down towards the lake. It's a long ways to go. Our plan for the drainage on this project is to not do a pipe system. We would like to do treatment through swales and add swales throughout there to reduce the amount of water that would head down to that joint ditch.
The swales would be not in the middle of the road.
I think we're looking more on the side. They won't be in the middle. They will be in green space or places like that. We're looking at a couple options again through this design period where we could put a bigger swale to handle a large amount of water, but we haven't picked that location yet.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. Well, I would urge the council to move forward with this.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to approve Resolution 23065, approving the professional services agreement with Adura for the final design of 15th Street reconstruction project from Harrison to Best Avenue.
Second.
We have a motion second. Seeing no further discussion, will the clerk take the roll, please?
McEvers.
Yes.
Gookin.
Yep.
English.
Yes.
Wood.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Miller.
Aye.
Spending authority.
Yes. Yeah, I come to you with this one, Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive. Last year, we did a project with East Side Highway District, and we chip sealed a section of Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive. It was a big project. It was a great partnership. We've had a significant amount of chip loss on that section of road, and so one of the reasons is the type of paint that ITD used to use. the oil product, the emulsion product, and the chip don't bond to that very well. So when you plow over it and things like that, it actually didn't create a good contact, and it has separated. And through the plowing and sweeping, we've lost pieces of the chip. Makes it really confusing. The layout of that project was not what we had hoped for. There was a couple adjustments we wanted to make. And so we went through and we've been looking at ways to shape that differently, straighten the lines, and make it a little more straightforward. Eventually, per our master plan, we will be putting things in out there like swales and stuff that will take up more of that asphalt space, and so it won't look like as a big of a piece of roadway there. People still get confused. They remember the old pattern and they don't drive the new pattern. So we're concerned with the safety. So what we're proposing is some money that we got from ITD back in 2018 to maintain that section of road. I don't have the authority to use that money, but we would like to put some money into the road this year. And the areas that we're looking at would be to do a fog seal out there, realign the lines, new striping, so we need to buy some paint. We would contract with Poe to do a fog seal. The reason Poe is there's not a lot of people out there willing to do that. Poe is very busy. They tried using somebody else on one of their projects and they walked off the job because they couldn't perform it at a fast enough pace. So we don't have a lot of options in who we use. I would like to add that they have done some good work for us this year. I'm very impressed with the quality of work on Ramsey Road, Northwest Boulevard. They are the contractor that did that, and they've helped us come up with some suggestions here. In addition to the fog seal and repainting of Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive, we're having problems with the stoplight there at Sherman and Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive. We inherited that in the same deal from ITD. They didn't upgrade any of the equipment. They just gave it to us as is. The ped ramps, they did have our crews redo the pedestrian ramps, so the actual concrete ped ramps have been updated to ADA requirements, but when they did that, all of the push buttons that are very old are now way too high for ADA compliance. So that's one area we want to look at legally for us to touch those. All the markings are gone. Per the MUTCD, our manual that we operate off of, once we touch them, we have to upgrade them to the current standard. Those were put in the early 90s. They've served us well, but they do need to be replaced. The other thing we need to upgrade is all the components inside the cabinet. These are all expensive, but our crews we've been out 6 times in the last 2 months because that signal goes into flash, and we need to put some equipment in there. So my ask tonight is that I could get a spending authority to put $50,000 into that section of road for some very needed maintenance.
Yes, Christian.
Well, I certainly agree with your request, but I'm curious, you say that the money's coming from the ITD budget. How much is in there?
So in 2018, before I was in this chair, there was dedicated funds that were given to us to maintain Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive, and I'll let Troy speak to it if I misrepresent, but we have $840,000 sitting there to maintain that section of road. And so I'm hoping to utilize some of that money for the maintenance instead out of our general maintenance line.
Well, absolutely. And I assume you have plans in the future
Yes.
for the money.
Again, that's a great question. For the master plan that you all have seen, there is some things that will happen out there. This isn't the money used to build that out, but we're going to have to do some maintenance to tie it all together. And then there's going to be some needed maintenance out there. There's a lot of traffic that drives on that road, and so crosswalks, and we've already installed an RFB out by Silver Beach, but there's other things that we'll need to do.
Thank you.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I was going to mention that, And because we get complaints about that, especially from bike riders, that the master plan shows that that bike lane is going to be separated with, a concrete curb. We don't know when that's going to come in. Apparently, we have the money, but what's holding it up?
So from what I've been told, this money is more for maintenance, not for a project like that. I would defer to someone else to answer that. There was some partnerships with other parties that would help build that out. If the resort builds another tower or something like that on a section of the road, it was going to reshape that section, and that's when we would do it. We have to kind of do it all at once. It's not like we could just do one little section. So it's not been a project that's formed yet. We just had to put some money and maintenance into the road last year, and this would be added to that, but this is not part of that project.
Okay, well, I can't wait till that happens.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dan?
Have a question, and maybe this will be part of a Troy thing, but, if we got 800 and some thousand from them in 2018, so 5 or 6 years ago, I know we've gone through some period of that time where nothing earned any interest, but now we're at a point where actually things are generating some interest and all of that. Is this one where that fund goes, the interest earned goes dedicated back to that maintenance, or does that go to the general fund? So Troy, or?
Yeah, we dedicate those dollars as per our agreement. Again, that's maintaining that roadway into perpetuity. And yes, your comptroller is working hard to earn interest on those dollars, especially now that rates are better. So we do dedicate it back. So it is growing a little bit, but Todd will wipe that out with this one transaction.
Yeah. But I think that's okay. I mean, if it's been sitting there, we haven't had to, so this, that's a well-needed project, and, as a biker back and forth there, it needs some help, so, good, okay, thanks.
Yes, Kiki.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion
Thank
to
you.
approve spending authority for Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive in the amount of $50,000.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk take the roll, please? Thank you, Todd.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yep.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item is amendments to our current budget. Stephanie?
Good evening, council. So I come to you with just a little bit of financial housekeeping that is required based to keep our financial audit in compliance. So a lot of these items that you're going to see tonight and have seen, you've seen before and have resolutions for. This is just, I need your approval to go ahead and accept and make the adjustments to close out the fiscal year that we're currently in and move forward to our next fiscal year. So just in general, fund, I have a few here. The municipal services contract that they have to purchase their short-term rental, you guys have already seen that and approved that. This CDA 2030, that was actually approved in the fiscal year 21-22 budget, and just that invoice was not issued yet until this current fiscal year, so we were obligated to make that payment. We made an agreement with Kootenai County EMS, and we hired 2 new paramedics halfway through our fiscal year. And in turn, they actually are reimbursing us for that 160 also. So the marine facility is finally completed. In order to get that completed, we had to use that 175,000 carryover there. The police had approved in their 21-22 budget to purchase some new vehicles. We all know that it took us quite a while to get some of that equipment here once it was on order, so we ended up having to pay for it in this current fiscal year. The police also had a JAG grant and purchased some cameras in this fiscal year. Then we also purchased that land next to the police station currently so that they could maybe get their expansion started. We are in contract and are required to, whatever tuition reimbursement isn't used, we roll that over, and that's at $16,000. The streets department had an approved budget in the 21-22 budget for a dump truck that took almost 18 months to get here, so it arrived and we paid for it in this current fiscal year. The streets overlay had some budget item left over, and we had to use that because we're getting a lot of our streets fixed currently. We are hoping to transfer some designated highway user fees for the Ramsey project and the 15th Street project. We had an approval for the $50,000 to the home share Kootenai County out of our ARPA. Something that you didn't get to see because these are emergencies, the vandalism of the city parks cost us $30,000 this year, and that was just the Parks Department going around and cleaning up and repairing whatever they needed to. The building department also had a building that was deemed that needed some, we worked with the homeowners, and that cost us. Their property is liened, and we hope when that property does get sold, the city will get reimbursed on that. You just approved this $50,000.
How handy.
So we're going to use that here in the very near future. Then in our non-general funds, the library is getting a new reading cabin for the children's facility, and that is, actually, we are getting reimbursed from the Library Foundation on that, but we do need to accept that $50,000 expense and capitalize it. Impact fee transfer for the marine facility, now that it is complete, we had to make that transfer to true up that account. Streets capital project for 15th and Harrison to Best. Streets capital project for Ramsey. The wastewater finally did also get their dump truck that was approved in 21-22 budget. That took us a few months to get here. Harbor Center repairs, that was a water break, and we did get some money back from ICRIMP for that. Jewett House sewer line replacement, we had to use some of the monies generated from the funds and cells that we use there to replace those. That was an emergency issue. We had to get those sewer lines fixed. The Jewett House garage replacement, that was actually from the windstorm way back in January of 2021. So that we are getting some money, but this is above and beyond to get that garage replaced. And parts capital improvements for the museum, that is actually going to be covered by Ignite money that needs to be spent by September 30th. So if you guys have any questions, I would request that you guys approve the amendment to our current year 22-23 fiscal year budget.
No questions, Mr. Mayor. I'm
Yes.
happy to make a motion. Stephanie, I understand these have all been approved in past budgets. This is not new money.
Yeah, this is just housekeeping.
Yes, okay. I make a motion to approve resolution number 23066, proposed amendments to fiscal year 2022-2023 budget and scheduling a public hearing for September 19th, 2023.
Second.
You have a motion second. Will the clerk take the roll, please?
Gookin.
Yep.
English.
Yes.
Wood.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Miller.
Aye.
McEvers.
Yes.
CDBG grant. Hillary.
All right, well, good evening,
Welcome, Hillary.
Mayor and council members. We have two CDBG items before you this evening, so this is the first one. And this is a request to use the remainder of our CDBG COVID funds for an amendment with CD Aid so that they can get paid back for some expenses that they helped hospitality workers who were dealing with COVID, and it also helps us in terms of closing out the CDBG COVID funds that we have received from HUD. And so, walk you through this. So your decision point this evening is whether or not City Council should approve authorization of amendment number 4 with CD Aid for the use of these COVID funds in this contract related to supporting our hospitality workers. So this really just kind of summarizes what is left in our COVID funds. So we had the ability to allocate 20% of the COVID funds. The total that we received for COVID funds in the two rounds, the first round and then the third round, was $446,000 and $799. And the staff report kind of outlines how all that was spent. So we have $24,705 and change remaining in our admin funds, and then $2,560 in kind of the project funds for COVID. And so our proposal is to get those together. We don't need any more administrative funds for the COVID funds, and so give that to CDA so that they can get paid back for some of their expenditures supporting our hospitality workers. So this is really kind of just a summary of the funding request. They had, CD8 has spent down all of the money that they had already been allocated, and there's definitely has been a continuing need. Even though it seems that COVID has been slowing down, there has been still impacts on our hospitality workers. So they have spent over $30,000 paying back the hospitality workers for expenses that fall within this program. And so they're basically requesting that we could reimburse them for that, and that is allowable by HUD through this COVID funding. So that kind of summarizes that. Oh, actually, let me slip back. So the last bullet point on this would be that if approved, that would bring their total of the COVID funds that they have received from the city as a pass-through from HUD to $120,640 and change. This is a summary of how our COVID funds have been allocated to projects since we received those. You kind of see those outlined in there. So we've been able to support a variety of projects, which has been great, helping organizations and our community members that are really in need. Again, they have to be the low to moderate income to qualify for receiving these, so organizations supporting those community members. And then as noted, those were the dollar amounts remaining in the admin funds and then the project funds for COVID. So our recommendation is to allocate the remaining funds to CD8 and allow them to be reimbursed for that total. So your decision point this evening is whether or not City Council should approve this request. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Hillary, so how did these guys get picked to get the leftovers?
They have been the only ones that have continued to see these impacts from COVID and have asked us. So they've had received the other funds, the other groups, I'll go back to that other slide. But some of these other ones were kind of finite things, so like the air scrubbers for Lake City Center, Meals on Wheels expanded, so that was kind of the one-time additional funding for that. So it was really just the hospitality workers have continued to see the impacts because they can't return to work, and so it's impacted them. They've had to have expenses for transportation, so car repairs and some of the other things, or assistance with paying their rent and some other bills that fit within the program.
And you get, it's tracked so you know where, how the money's being used.
Correct, yes. We have records on each of the individuals that receive it to make sure that it meets all of our requirements and HUD's requirements.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan?
Well, I would just say that that last slide, I mean, gives a good picture of, what we did with that funding. So, in one sense, it's all of those nonprofits who got the money, and they did very tangible things, but it's because we made the decision to direct it that way, and so I think there's some, we really addressed a lot of needs with that, and it really got spread around, as you can see, and as I understand this request, it's something that they've already spent doing exactly what, needs to happen, so we will reimburse them, which just means that they'll have some more in the pot to keep going because their need, and who they serve never goes away with that. So, yeah, I certainly support this, so.
Would you like to make a motion?
If we're ready to go, I'm good to go. So I would make a motion to approve Resolution 23067, approving Amendment Number 4 to the agreement with 4 CDBG grant funds for CD aid for use of CDGB-CV funds. Period. Okay.
Come on, Dan, you can do it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, will the clerk take the roll, please?
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Googan.
Yeah.
You're on.
Okay, great. Well, I will continue on with some CDBG discussion. So this evening is the public hearing that is required for our 5-year plan for how we plan to use our community development block grant funds. And in the 5-year plan, it also includes the 1-year plan for the 2023 funds. And as noted in the staff report, we just switched that over. So October 1 is the start of our 2023. We tried to align it with our fiscal year, but it's a little confusing because it's almost like a year behind our city's fiscal year. But that's the purpose for this evening. So I'll kind of give you an update on what's included in the plan, how we did public outreach, comments we received, and then how we're making recommendations. And then, of course, opportunity for public hearing. So here is kind of that overview. So really just some background, how we did involve the public, those needs identified. Within the 5-year plan, as I mentioned, there's the 1-year plan for 2023 funds. We have to show how the funds will be allocated, and so we'd like your input this evening if you agree with those or if you'd like any changes. And then the public hearing, if there are comments this evening from either yourselves or from the public that we want to incorporate, we can make changes to the plan, and then we will be submitting the plan to HUD tomorrow for their review. And then at the end of the meeting, we'll have decision point recommendation. So just a little bit of history. The city has been receiving funds from HUD for our Community Development Block Grant program since 2007. And so this comes through HUD, so Housing and Urban Development Agency, the federal government. And in order to use this Community Development Block Grant funds, it has to benefit our low to moderate income community members. And so it goes through organizations generally, or individuals through some of our programs like our MRAP, our Emergency Minor Home Repair Program, for individuals that qualify for that. And so how HUD looks at it is you're looking at different increments of kind of what is our median income in the area. And we look at Kootenai County's income. And so you can see on the bottom of the slide, we have the 2023 numbers for Kootenai County. It looks high, that's $93,900, but that's for 2 income earners, a family of 4. And so that's our median income, and then HUD looks at it based on the 30%, 50%, and 80% are kind of those different thresholds for meeting the low to moderate income. In order to have an activity funded, you have to meet one of the national objectives, and so those are listed there on the screen. And so to benefit those LMI community members, as I mentioned, there's also some that we haven't used very frequently, but you can also help to aid in slum and blight, to remediate that, or to meet an urgent need, which was the case in kind of our COVID funds. And then you also would have to have an activity that meets not only something in our consolidated plan, so our 5-year plan, and in the annual action plan, and then be a HUD-approved activity. And then when we do make recommendations that council would approve for allocating funds, we have to look at how the size of the project and how much staff time it's going to take as well. Those are important considerations. And then, of course, the capacity of the subrecipient, and have they been around, and can they provide all the required documentation to meet the grant requirements. These are just some eligible activities on this slide and the next where money can be used, kind of the different activities that qualify. So acquisition of real property is one, relocation, demolition, rehabilitation of residential and non-residential structures, construction activities related to public facilities and improvements. Public services, there is a cap, so 15% of our annual allocation only can be spent on public services. That was different with our COVID funds. We didn't have that same cap, but on our normal grant funds, we do have that limitation. Then there's some other activities related to energy conservation, renewable energy, and then economic development are all eligible. And then here's an example of some of the eligible public service activities, and many of these we have assisted organizations providing these services over time. So some of the ones that are very common are assisting with our senior citizens, mental health is a common one, homeless person services through St. Vincent de Paul is common, the child care services, like we have the child care scholarship we've supported. And then this at the bottom just really kind of shows what that breakdown is of our allocation for looking at the 2023 funds. If we were to say 15% cap, so the total of that would be $52,367. And within that, each year we have set aside that $10,000 for the Meals on Wheels, which that's been raised from a couple years ago. So that's kind of the standard, and then showing the remainder that would be available for public services. For administrative costs, there is a cap of 20%. So again, looking at the allocation for each year, 20% of the funds can be spent on administrative. So that covers kind of all the wages. It also covers training. That covers if we have to hire a consultant to assist with things, doing studies, doing the advertising for the public hearings. All of that is in support of fair housing or things that are covered within. A little unusual, and that's because we had the COVID funds, and so this is not a normal pie chart as compared to the previous 5-year plan. But you can see the breakdown of public facilities, housing, public services, and economic development kind of on that slide. And then these are the activities that were funded within that, our last 5-year plan. So we did do an economic development project through North Idaho College. We had these housing activities, which included the emergency minor home repair projects, helping 56 households, and then the Habitat for Humanity project, these public facilities improvements, and then public services, including the COVID. So any of the CV labels are for the COVID funds. So with our current plan that we have drafted, that we're having the public hearing on tonight, so the 2023 to 2027, one of the things that we did differently, based on some guidance from our HUD representative, was to look at restructuring our goals a little bit to make it easier for us to not only kind of allocate and track the funds, but for reporting back to them. And so before we'd had kind of this big category of community opportunity grants, but it was really hard to say, okay, well, where do certain things fall within that? And so based on that guidance and then doing the surveys that we did with the community members, our department heads and council members, we received support for kind of further subdividing those into more distinguishable goals. So like housing is now its own versus having it grouped with kind of everything. Same with the public facility and infrastructure projects, public services, and then the homelessness assistance and economic development. Also to note, within this 5-year plan, this doesn't mean we have to fund all of these things, and we're not saying right now that we have to, in each year fund each of these. So this is really just over the 5-year time frame. These are the priorities that we heard from community members and from department heads and some council members, that these are the things that we thought would be the best way to organize and frame this.
Hillary, could I ask? So that's not a priority list?
It's not. No, those
Okay.
are just the 5 goals. So that doesn't, it doesn't have to be in that order. Although it did, and I can look at the survey results, but housing definitely did come out as the top
Okay.
response for our survey results, and I'll kind of go through that. So one of the things that was really important too with creating this 5-year plan is we have to pull together demographic information and data. And so the housing availability and affordability study for Kootenai County that was done in December 2021 has a lot of great information. So we were able to pull from that and kind of capture some of the information. When we do these plans, HUD has this online program, and so it automatically pulls in some data, but it's great to have local resources and data and reports that we can really put in more accurate information for what are the actual costs of housing in our area, and what are those needs we have. And so as Kiki knows very well, Councilmember Miller, from our work with the Regional Housing Growth Issues Partnership, we've really seen this struggle. So 75% of our county residents can no longer afford to buy a home, and these housing prices have just skyrocketed. So you can see on this last slide that housing prices have increased 120% in just over 4 years. So this really shows that there's a huge need for housing, and so that was what we saw as evident in the survey responses. So with this 5-year plan, we did a lot of outreach. We did a request for proposals as part of that, and that's something that's new too. We used to do that after we had our funding allocation. Now we're doing it in advance just to see what are the needs out there. So we did that, and then we did, as I mentioned, that there's the surveys that we did, the 3 surveys, and then some public forums to be able to gather some information. We advertised it in a variety of different ways, and then also reached out to our stakeholder list. We have over 189 stakeholders on that list just to get their input. For the survey, and in the staff report, there's a link to the full survey, so if you were interested in seeing that, it's available on the website. But we had over 100 respondents, and this is looking at just the community-wide one, not department heads or council members. So 87 of the respondents were within the city of Coeur d'Alene, and then there were a number that were organizations representing our low to moderate income community members. And so this was something, this question was regarding kind of the priorities. Do they like, I'm sorry, not priorities, the goals. Do they agree with these goals? And so majority said yes, they agreed that these were some good goals for how we would frame the plan and our priorities for funding over the next 5 years. And then this question is on the housing. So do you feel you have the financial resources for adequate housing. There was also a little sub-question, so if you're representing an organization, do you feel that your members or your, the people that receive services from you do have financial resources for adequate housing? This was kind of an interesting one because it was almost split. But there's definitely is a need, because if you look at the survey results, a number of the community members, the majority were either in the low income bracket or were in the higher income bracket. And so it really kind of showed the distinct groups that participated in the survey. So huge need for this, especially impacts on our senior citizens that are on a fixed income. And then this was a question about, do we feel like there are enough nonprofits providing public services within Coeur d'Alene and surrounding areas? Again, this one was split. We did get some good information asking what services were missing. So the survey, the individual responses are included. And so here are some examples of that. Definitely social help for seniors is a big one. And then also continuing concerns about mental health and child care assistance. So for the 2023 annual action plan, within this 5-year plan, as I mentioned, we have kind of this breakdown of how we are proposing to fund this. We did work with our ad hoc grant review committee that we pull together each year for our community development block grants, and Councilmember McEvers serves on that. Kind of asked them how they thought that the funds should be broken down for the 2023 plan year. And so this top one is this annual allocation for Meals on Wheels, so $10,000 there. The $75,000 would be to continue our emergency minor home repair program. The bulk of the funding would really be for affordable housing activities and subsistence payments. And so you can see kind of on the left, that would be broken out into the housing and the public services goal. And then administrative would be that 20% as noted for the total allocation for 2023 of $358,560. There's also in the plan a proposal to use some of our funds that we already have that have been accruing to do some sidewalk work. So not a proposal to use any of the new funds coming in, but just ones that are sitting there that haven't been used on sidewalk projects that would benefit our low to moderate income community members. So safe routes to school would be an example, or any of the areas where we have an accessibility issue, so providing the ADA, and then also a low to moderate income resident who might have a sidewalk, a code violation where there's an unsafe sidewalk, so things like that could be done. This is all going to be determined on if our streets and engineering department either has availability or if we can outsource this. If we cannot use the funds, we can certainly defer these and move them to a different project, and then in the future kind of build back that sidewalk fund. So that's in the plan currently. So that would be a total of $29,600. So with that summarizes kind of the plan. I am happy to entertain any questions about that. And then, of course, we have our public hearing, and then any guidance that you have
Woody and then
for me.
So can you go back to the priorities?
Yes.
I think the yellow one with the prices plugged in. So I get all that. The $201,000 for what can that really do? That doesn't buy a house, right?
It does not. So how this one, so we, through the grant proposal process, we did receive a number of grants, and there was one that came in that was for doing an affordable housing project. That one is since kind of on hold. But there have been some other proposals for things like down payment assistance that might work for that, as well as possibly funding some more subsistence programs like the CD-aid one I mentioned, so related to kind of paying for rent and utilities to kind of help with that, because that's really where we're seeing a big need, is for people that are either trying to buy homes or trying to continue to live in their homes in our community, either for rent or for sale homes.
Just, it doesn't seem like very much money. I mean, not
It's
too many
not.
projects and it's gone, right?
Right, and that's our challenge with, we don't receive a very big allocation.
Oh, I get it.
We're small compared to a lot of larger communities across the country.
And we're still taking care of the old folks staying in their homes, right? New roofs, plumbing,
Right, so we still have
electrical.
this 75,000 allocated.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hillary, mine was on the housing price tag too. Is there any difference in latitude as how that money can be spent? And where I'm going with this is, and are familiar with some of the toolkit items that are still being put together, the ADU program, the fundraising program for buy downs.
Right.
Can this money be used for any of that type of administrative, or does it have to go directly to a qualifying LMI individual?
It is, let's see, so it's a little tricky, so it could potentially assist with buy down if it was in the city of Coeur d'Alene and if it was someone that was income qualified. And the best way to do that would be through a nonprofit that qualifies, that could then administer that and then report back to us. So it could do that. The other things like the ADU program, it wouldn't work for that.
'cause it's
That's
too
going to be a little
broad.
trickier, right, because it's broader. That's multi-jurisdictional and it's not tied to income.
And then my other piece to that was, I know that United Way is running out of a lot of their childcare
Right.
scholarship funding.
Right.
Do you have to track this back down to the individual application that they scholarship, or are you able to just fund directly to United Way and then they manage it with their other funding?
So we fund the organization, but they keep track of all that. So then when we have a monitoring or an audit from HUD, then we have to be able to provide that,
So
they have
they
the
do the audit
individuals and here's
side.
how they were income qualified and they received this scholarship and this amount.
That's a really important program. That's
Right.
going to be
It is.
devastating when that money runs out.
Dan?
Looking at the slide, just one up from this that talks about what services are missing.
Right.
Well, affordable housing, but actually we've got we're not going to go out and build a bunch of houses, but actually there's a good chunk of it that's going towards that, social help for seniors with low income. We do, support the senior center, and we have for years, but then I see two of them, any involving health, mental health, and dental, childcare, and then the last one, childcare again, and mental health assistance. So it seems that in these days, I guess I'm kind of tuned into, the mental health assistance community and needing help, and yet I don't see anything in here addressing that. Maybe I'm missing that, or is there a disconnect between the, based on the funding of $358,000, I don't see anything that addresses that mental health or childcare.
Right, so this year, as I mentioned, we received the grant proposals in advance of putting together this plan, and so we didn't get mental health support
Okay,
requests.
because we're looking
We
backwards
did
for
get, I'm
this
trying to remember if we did receive childcare request or not, but they have not fully spent down the childcare scholarship ones through United Way, because they'd received multiple allocations. So it was based on organizations that either applied for the funds or, have they been spending down, and then also what were the biggest needs we identified for just this upcoming year.
Yeah.
In the 5-year plan, if you look back at the goals, and I'm happy to go back to those, that includes the public services, which does include that, and that's an eligible
Yeah.
expense.
So
the
1
mental
year from
health,
now-
childcare, all of those are eligible in there. It's also possible that if we go through this process and we can't fund enough of this, we can certainly open back up the process to receive more grants. We could do an amendment to the plan, and then certainly we can pursue other organizations, because you're right, there is a demand, there's a
And
need in
then
our
1
community.
year from now, we definitely
Correct.
can revamp that
Right.
list.
And this
Okay.
is just for the 2023 funds. So we'll have to do this for each of the 5 years within
Yep.
the plan. So we'll come
Okay.
back to you each year with the
Okay, thank you.
annual action plan.
Christie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hillary, I wanted to visit, I guess, in more detail, the affordable housing activities, specifically on rent assistance.
Right.
So I don't know what all of the rules are, but in the last couple of weeks, I've become very aware of another crisis of such in this community. And I've gotten personally involved with a couple of stray dogs and spending a lot of time at the animal shelter. And I've got Citizen Ron Hartman on the hook to take one of those. He's thinking it over. He's this close to saying yes. But the real education I've gotten from that animal shelter, and they're a godsend, is that from COVID, essentially, there are a whole lot of people that went out and got pets, and then they stayed home with these pets, and then now everyone's back to work, and the pets have just maybe been turned loose, or it's an affordability issue for seniors especially that can't afford to feed them, and for young people trying to get an apartment that cannot come up with that pet deposit. Now, I understand that these monies need to go to people first, but there is a trickle-down effect. I mean, our animal control, their calls for service are going up, trying to catch all these pets. The shelter's full of cats and dogs that are just being turned in because of these pet deposits. And they're not, during COVID, they didn't spay or neuter them because they couldn't. And so the population is just out of control. So my question is, if someone were in dire straits, certainly homeless people, you see them sometimes with pets, are we able to cover that pet deposit so that they can keep that pet in their home rather than just turning it loose on the street?
Not through Community Development Block Grant funds, so it is pretty specific where we can use the funds, and even for the rental assistance, it's only 3 months at a time, and it's for kind of very specific things, like to cover the utilities or for the rent. That's kind of all we can do for that program. There's been some discussions kind of outside of Community Development Block Grant. Are there ways to maybe come up with some fund to assist some of the senior citizens that are living in the mobile home parks that don't specifically qualify for this? You know, is there another group or organization that could come up with something like that? Or, as you mentioned, assist with people that are struggling to make ends meet and then, you know, now have to rehome a pet, because that is a challenge. But yeah, it's very tricky with a federal grant like this where we're really not allowed to kind of go outside of the lines with any of our funding.
Well, you've answered my question. And I just thought well, you know, could people stop having to turn their pets out because of this pet deposit? But sounds like this is not the avenue.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan?
Well, just to address that, getting creative in the future, if we built in, you know, into a future thing, some mental health support, something, you know, I'm aware, I mean, people with companion animal. I mean, if it made somebody, and I've got right now, somebody I know, you know, that, you know, with a companion animal and the issue, and so if we were to get, in the future, you know, look at, okay, we do some mental health and maybe we target a piece of that for,
Can they
you
take
know,
a dog
the
right now?
companion. Well, no, they've got one. They're dealing with the rest. So, but I mean, we know, there's a direct correlation between animals, companion animals, support animals on a spectrum, and people and their well-being. And you know, as we know, in disasters, war areas, and stuff, people don't leave because if the pet can't go, then forget it. So, and so then you're left to deal with it another way. So anyway, there might be some creative future things we can plant some seeds. So.
Sure.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Hillary, I see that ADA sidewalk abetment is in here, and I support that. But if I recall, that used to be in the street department. And Todd, was that in your department? And when did it move over to CDGB?
It is not, so it's still in the Streets and Engineering Department, and they have their own sidewalk program, and then we just feed into that with some CDBG funds only that are eligible. So we can only fund sidewalks that are in our LMI census tract areas.
Okay.
And then for the things I mentioned, kind of furthering the goals of the safe routes to school or ADA, things like that.
So
So there's a different pot of money that Streets and Engineering manages, and Todd
So you
could
still do that?
certainly speak to that.
Okay, so Todd's saying, yeah, they still do that. Because I was concerned that it had gone away, but it's still there.
It is still there.
And this
yes.
just helps people if sidewalks all busted up, they can get a grant from the city
Right,
to
and
help
generally
fix
what
it.
we've tried to do, we did one over by Fernan.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one where we were able to do multiple blocks at a time, and sometimes we have to require right-of-way and do the improvements, but we try and do it for more than one home at a time, but it is possible we could do it if there was a section or one lot that was really severely impaired that was within that census tract, or if the homeowner was qualifying.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I'll, thank you, Hillary.
You're very welcome.
I'll open the public hearing, and we have nobody signed up to testify.
Oh, there's one. Or not.
I didn't sign up, but can I anyway?
Yes, but you will have to sign up.
Or sign down.
Okay.
Shall I go? Shall I? Hi, Suzanne Knudsen. I live here in Coeur d'Alene, and I co-chair a regional accessibility subcommittee through the HREI. And I think what we're doing there is we are working to help Kootenai County to become more accessible to people with disabilities. That doesn't mean ADA compliant, because the ADA compliance does not necessarily mean accessible. So I know that CDBG funds may be beneficial to homeowners who can't afford to sell and move into a more accessible home in order to age in their home, or if they become disabled, but they have to be a homeowner in order to qualify. From my understanding, they have to own the home in order to qualify for CDBG funding. And CDBG funding, again, as I understand, cannot be used for rentals. So a lot of people who would qualify for this CDBG funding can't qualify because of income or low income to moderate income. They can't qualify because they don't own their home. So then what do we do? We have youth in foster care. There wasn't anything about that up there. We have 25 to 28% of people in our community have some type of disability. There was no accessibility on that. I know that some people in the disability community do receive Meals on Wheels, so that could discount that. But the accessibility subcommittee doesn't qualify for CDBG funding either, because we don't serve a population of people with disabilities. We serve the community in making it more accessible. So if there was a business or a building that needed to be more accessible because they don't have a way for someone who uses a mobility device to get into the building, like they need a ramp or they need a doorbell or some kind of push button to automatically open the door, we don't qualify to help them get funding, because we would serve the business in order to make them more accessible. We don't serve but it would in essence serve the disability community. So there are some things that I would love to see addressed through this process with HUD. I don't know if anything would change in this cycle, but maybe we could get the ball rolling to find some more funding. I would love to know. There was the suggestion to maybe get some of those funds to a different nonprofit organization to help manage some of those funds and report back, but I don't know which ones those would be, and so maybe we need to contact some of those. This is a new thing that we're just trying. I know that there are other areas that have disability councils or accessibility councils, and so we're researching that to find out how they're working in their communities. I just visited Butte, Montana. They have a large disability population as well, and I visited some of their programs and things like that. But I have a meeting next week on the phone with their disability council chairperson. So hopefully we can move forward with this. But there are some things that I didn't see funding for, and because rentals are a huge part of people in low to moderate income situations that don't qualify for housing modifications, that's a concern that I have. So thank you.
Well, going forward, I hope you can visit with Hillary and her staff to
for sure.
to make those things blend
Yeah.
more effectively. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
I'll close the public hearing and would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to approve Community Development Block Grant CBDG Consolidated Plan for 2024. Oh, wow, all the way to 2027, and the 2023 Annual Action Plan.
Second.
A motion is second. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor respond with aye.
Aye.
Opposed with nay. Motion carries.
Move to recess to August 21st, noon in the library community room for a workshop regarding the 2023-24 annual appropriation budget.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. All in favor, respond with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are recessed.